Jake Morrison felt the ship shake around him like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel and alarms screamed in his ears. The Star Runner, his trusty cargo hauler, was being pulled out of hyperspace by something massive. What the hell is that? Jake muttered, gripping the controls as his ship spun wildly. Through the viewport, he saw a planet that looked like it was made of fire. Volcanoes dotted its surface, spewing bright orange lava into the dark sky. The planet's gravity had grabbed his ship and was pulling it down fast. Jake had been flying cargo routes for 15 years. He had seen pirates, asteroid storms, and engine failures, but he had never seen anything like this. The planet appeared on no star charts he knew. It seemed to exist in a dead zone between two systems, hidden in the darkness of space. The ship's computer was going crazy. Systems were failing one after another. Life support was dropping, shields were down, and the engines were dead. Jake had maybe 10 minutes before he hit the surface. He worked fast, rerouting power and trying to find some way to slow his fall. "Come on, baby," he whispered to his ship. "Don't give up on me now." The Star Runner broke through the planet's thick atmosphere. The air was full of ash and toxic gases that made the ship's hull glow hot. Jake could see the ground rushing up to meet him. Jagged rocks and rivers of lava covered the landscape. There was nowhere safe to land. Jake strapped himself in tight and held on. The ship hit hard, bouncing twice before sliding across rough ground. Metal screamed and sparks flew. Then everything went quiet except for the hiss of escaping air and the crackling of fires outside. Jake opened his eyes and checked himself for injuries. His left shoulder hurt and he had a cut on his forehead, but he was alive. The ship was a mess. Panels hung loose from the ceiling and smoke filled the air. His oxygen levels were dropping fast. The hull had cracks that let in the planet's poisonous atmosphere. He grabbed his emergency kit and put on his breathing mask. The kit had enough air for maybe 6 hours. After that, he would need to fix the life support or find another way to breathe. Jake climbed out of his pilot's seat and looked around the damaged ship. The communication system was destroyed. No one would hear his distress calls. Great, Jake said to himself, stranded on a volcano planet with no way to call for help. He made his way to the airlock. The outer door was jammed, but he managed to force it open with a crowbar. Hot air rushed in, making him glad for his breathing mask. The smell of sulfur and burning rock filled his nose even through the filter. Outside, the planet was even worse than it looked from space. The ground was black rock covered in a thin layer of ash. Rivers of bright lava flowed between tall peaks. The sky was dark red, filled with clouds of smoke and ash. Lightning flashed in the distance. Jake had landed in hell. He walked around his ship to check the damage. The hull was cracked in several places. One engine was completely gone, torn off during the crash. The other engine was buried under a pile of rocks. It would take days to dig it out, and he did not have days' worth of air. Jake was thinking about his next move when he heard a sound that did not belong. It was like metal scraping against rock, but it was coming from somewhere nearby. He followed the sound, climbing over broken rocks and dodging small streams of lava. About half a mile from his ship, Jake found another crashed vessel. This one was sleek and silver, nothing like the boxy cargo haulers humans used. It was clearly alien technology, with smooth curves and no visible seams. Part of it was buried under fallen rocks from what looked like a recent landslide. As Jake got closer, he heard the sound again. Someone was trapped inside, trying to dig their way out. Jake looked around and saw a weak spot in the rock pile. If he could move a few keystones, he might be able to create an opening. Jake started pulling rocks away from the ship. The work was hard, and he was sweating inside his protective suit. Some of the rocks were hot from sitting near lava flows. Others were sharp and cut through his gloves. But he kept working. If someone was alive in there, he had to help. After 20 minutes of digging, Jake made a hole big enough for someone to crawl through. He called out but heard no answer. The scraping sound had stopped. Jake worried that whoever was inside had given up or passed out. He made the hole bigger and squeezed inside the alien ship. The interior was dark, lit only by a few emergency lights. Everything was built for someone taller than humans, with high ceilings and long doorways. The air inside smelled different, like flowers mixed with metal. Jake found the source of the scraping sounds in what looked like the cockpit. A tall figure in a blue uniform was slumped over the controls. The being was definitely not human. She had blue skin, long silver hair, and was at least 7 feet tall. Her breathing was shallow, and there was purple blood on her forehead. Jake checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. She was alive but hurt. He looked around the cockpit and saw that part of the ceiling had collapsed. A heavy beam had fallen and pinned her leg to the floor. That explained the scraping sounds. She had been trying to free herself. Jake found a lever among the ship's tools and used it to lift the beam. The alien woman's leg looked broken, but at least she was free. Jake was trying to figure out how to move her when the ground started shaking. Outside, Jake heard a rumbling sound that was getting louder. He looked out through a crack in the ship's hull and saw something that made his blood run cold. A wall of lava was flowing down from the mountains, heading straight for them. The landslide that had trapped the alien ship had also blocked a lava flow. Now the lava had found a new path, and it was coming fast. Jake grabbed the unconscious alien woman and pulled her toward the hole he had made. She was heavy, but fear gave him strength. The lava flow was only a few hundred yards away now. He could feel the heat getting stronger with each second. Jake dragged the woman through the hole and away from the ship. Behind them, the lava reached the silver vessel and began to cover it. The metal hull glowed bright red, then white hot. In seconds, the beautiful alien ship was gone, swallowed by molten rock. Jake carried the woman to a safe distance and set her down gently. She was still unconscious, but her breathing was getting stronger. Jake looked back at where her ship had been. Nothing was left but a pool of cooling lava. He had saved her life, but now they were both stranded on this deadly world with limited air and no way home. The alien woman woke up 3 hours later. Jake was sitting nearby trying to fix his damaged radio with parts from his emergency kit. When she opened her eyes, they were a bright golden color that seemed to glow in the dim light. She tried to sit up, then winced in pain from her injured leg. "Easy there," Jake said, putting down his tools. "Your leg is broken. You need to take it slow." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she spoke in perfect English, though her voice had a musical quality to it. "You are human." "Yeah, that's right. Name's Jake Morrison. I pulled you out of your ship before the lava got it." She looked around at the desolate landscape, then back at Jake. Her expression was strange, like she was trying to solve a difficult puzzle. "You saved my life." "I guess so." "Couldn't just leave you there to cook." The woman struggled to sit up straighter despite her pain. "I am Commander Zara Veltar of the Cathari Empire. By saving my life, you have created a debt that I must repay." Jake frowned. "Look, I don't want anything from you. I just did what anyone would do. We're both stuck on this rock, so we might as well help each other out." Zara's golden eyes widened. "You do not understand. In my culture, a life debt is sacred. I am bound to serve you until this debt is fulfilled." "Serve me?" Jake shook his head. "That's crazy. We're equals here. Both our ships are wrecked, and we both need to find a way off this planet." But Zara would not listen to his protests. She insisted that Jake was now her superior, and that she must follow his orders. This made Jake uncomfortable. He had never owned another being, and he did not want to start now. Despite their cultural differences, they had to work together to survive. Jake's breathing mask was already showing low oxygen levels. Zara's people breathed a different mix of gases, and she had her own air supply, but it would not last much longer than his. They decided to look for shelter first. The surface of the planet was too dangerous with its acid rain and unstable ground. Jake suggested they explore some caves he had seen during his crash landing. Zara agreed, though she phrased it as following his wise command. Walking was difficult for Zara with her broken leg, but she made a crutch from a piece of metal debris. Jake offered to help her, but she refused, saying it was not proper for him to assist his servant. This attitude frustrated Jake, but he decided to address it later when they were safer. The caves were about 2 miles from the crash site. The journey took them across fields of cooled lava and around steaming hot springs. The air was thick with ash, and Jake's breathing mask was working hard to filter out the toxic gases. As they walked, Jake learned more about Zara's people. The Cathari Empire was old and powerful, with technology far beyond what humans had achieved. They valued honor and duty above all else, and their society was built on strict codes of conduct. A life debt was one of the most serious obligations a Cathari could have. "But what if I don't want a servant?" Jake asked as they climbed over a ridge of black rock. "That does not matter," Zara replied. "The debt exists whether you accept it or not. I cannot return to my people until it is fulfilled. What happens if you go back without fulfilling it?" Zara was quiet for a moment. "Exile. I would be cast out, forbidden from ever returning to Cathari space." Jake began to understand why this was so important to her. Her entire life and identity were tied to her honor. Without it, she would have nothing. They reached the caves as the first drops of acid rain began to fall. The rain on this planet was not water, but a mixture of chemicals that could eat through metal and flesh. They hurried into the cave system, just as the sky opened up with a downpour that would have killed them both. The caves were dark and went deep into the planet's crust. Jake used a flashlight from his kit to explore, while Zara produced a device that created a soft blue glow. The caves were dry and seemed stable, carved from some kind of hard volcanic rock that had cooled long ago. They found a large chamber about a quarter-mile inside. It had several passages leading in different directions, and a small pool of clear water in one corner. Jake tested the water with a sensor from his kit. It was clean and safe to drink. "This will work," Jake said, setting down his pack. "We can make camp here." "Yes, Master," Zara replied, immediately beginning to organize their supplies. "Don't call me Master," Jake said firmly. "My name is Jake." "As you wish, Master Jake," Jake sighed. This was going to take some work. They spent the next few hours setting up their temporary home. Zara proved to be very capable despite her injury. She had tools and equipment that Jake had never seen before. One device created a barrier of energy that kept the cave entrance sealed against the acid rain. Another generated heat to keep them warm. Jake worked on salvaging useful parts from both crash sites. His ship was closer, so he made several trips to gather food, water, and equipment. Zara wanted to come with him, but Jake ordered her to stay in the cave and rest her leg. She obeyed instantly, though Jake could see she did not like being inactive. On his third trip to the ships, Jake ran into trouble. The acid rain had stopped, but now the planet's strange day-night cycle was bringing new dangers. As the temperature dropped, creatures emerged from underground. They looked like giant worms made of rock with mouths full of crystal teeth. They fed on heat, attracted to anything warmer than the cooling ground. Jake was carrying a load of supplies when 3 of the creatures surrounded him. They moved fast for their size, tunneling through the ground and popping up in unexpected places. Jake dropped his supplies and ran, but the creatures were faster. Just when Jake thought he was done for, Zara appeared. She moved with incredible speed despite her broken leg, carrying a weapon that fired beams of bright energy. The creatures screamed as the energy hit them, their rock-like skin cracking and splitting. They retreated underground, leaving Jake and Zara alone. "I told you to stay in the cave," Jake said, breathing hard. "You were in danger," Zara replied. "It is my duty to protect you." "What about your leg?" Zara looked down at her injury. "Pain is temporary. Dishonor lasts forever." Jake stared at her. She had risked her own safety to save him, just as he had saved her. But while Jake had acted on instinct and compassion, Zara was driven by a code of honor he barely understood. They gathered the scattered supplies and made their way back to the cave. As they walked, Jake found himself thinking about what Zara had said. Her people had rules that seemed strange to him, but they were not necessarily wrong. They were just different. That night, as they sat by the heat generator eating emergency rations, Jake tried to learn more about Cathari culture. Zara told him stories of great heroes who had died fulfilling their duties, and of the shame that came to those who broke their word. "It sounds like a hard way to live," Jake said. "Structure brings strength," Zara replied. "Without honor, we are no better than animals." Jake thought about his own people, with their messy democracy and individual freedoms. Humans did not always agree on what was right, but they tried to figure it out together. It was chaotic, but it worked. "Maybe," Jake said, "but sometimes being flexible is more important than being right." Zara looked at him with those golden eyes. "You are not what I expected from a human." "What did you expect?" "Savagery, selfishness. Your people have a reputation in the galaxy." Jake laughed. "Yeah, we can be pretty rough around the edges. But we're not all bad." As they settled down to sleep, Jake realized that despite their differences, he was beginning to respect Zara. She was brave, loyal, and skilled. Her concept of honor might be foreign to him, but it came from a genuine desire to do right by others. Tomorrow, they would have to figure out how to get off this hostile world. But tonight, for the first time since the crash, Jake felt like he might not be alone in this fight. 3 days had passed since they made camp in the caves. Jake and Zara had fallen into a routine of sorts, though it was one that continued to frustrate Jake. Every morning, Zara would ask for his orders for the day. Every decision had to be presented as his command, even when the ideas came from her. They had been exploring the cave system, looking for minerals they could use to build a communication device. Zara's knowledge of technology was impressive, and she had identified several rare elements they would need. The problem was finding them in this hostile environment. On the fourth morning, as they prepared for another expedition deeper into the caves, Jake decided he had to address the elephant in the room. "Zara, we need to talk about this whole life debt thing." She stopped organizing their equipment and looked at him with those golden eyes. "What would you like to discuss, Master Jake?" "There you go again with the master stuff. Look, I get that this is important to your culture, but it's making things weird between us. We're partners in this survival situation, not master and servant." Zara set down the scanner she had been holding. Her expression grew serious. "You do not understand the gravity of what you ask. A life debt is not a simple matter among my people." "Then explain it to me. Help me understand." Zara was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Finally she spoke. "In the early days of our civilization, we were a scattered people living on a harsh world. The only way to survive was through absolute loyalty to one another. If someone saved your life, you owed them everything, because without them you would have nothing." She moved to the cave wall and traced patterns in the rock dust. "Over thousands of years, this became the foundation of our society. Honor, duty, loyalty, the willingness to sacrifice for others. These values built our empire and made us strong. But times change," Jake said. "What worked thousands of years ago might not be the best way to live now." Zara's expression darkened. "My people would disagree. Those who abandon the old ways are seen as corrupt, weak. If I return home without fulfilling my debt to you, I will be cast out. My family will be shamed. My children, if I ever have any, will be marked as the offspring of an oathbreaker." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. "Your whole family? That seems harsh. Honor is not individual among the Kithari. It flows through bloodlines, through generations. What I do reflects on all who came before me and all who will come after." For the first time, Jake truly understood the weight Zara was carrying. This was not just about her personal pride. Her entire family's reputation was at stake. The responsibility was enormous. "So what would it take to fulfill this debt?" Jake asked. "Traditionally, I would serve you until you release me or until I have saved your life in return, balancing the scales. What if I just released you right now?" Zara shook her head. "It must be earned. A gift freely given cannot be freely returned. I must prove my worth through service." Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Human relationships were complicated enough without adding alien honor codes to the mix. They continued their exploration of the caves, going deeper than they had before. The tunnels seemed to go on forever, winding through the planet's crust like a maze. Zara's scanner showed rich deposits of the minerals they needed, but they were always just out of reach, in passages too narrow to navigate or chambers filled with toxic gases. As they walked, Zara told Jake more about Cathari society. Their empire spanned dozens of star systems, each world contributing its unique resources and knowledge. The military, which Zara served in, was considered the most honorable profession. Commanders like her were expected to embody the highest ideals of their people. "What's your rank exactly?" Jake asked as they squeezed through a particularly narrow passage. "I command a battle group of 12 ships and 3,000 warriors." Jake stopped walking. 3,000? And you're stuck here playing servant to a cargo pilot? "Rank means nothing without honor," Zara replied. "A beggar with integrity is worth more than a general who breaks his word." They emerged into a large chamber unlike any they had seen before. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. Ancient carvings depicted beings that looked almost human, but with subtle differences in their proportions and features. "This is old," Zara said, running her scanner over the walls. "Very old. These symbols predate any known civilization in this sector." Jake studied the carvings more closely. They seemed to tell a story, showing the beings working together to build great structures. Other panels showed them studying the stars, developing technology, and eventually disappearing in what looked like a great exodus. Who were they? Jake wondered aloud, unknown. But they were advanced. "Look at this." Zara pointed to a section of wall that was not carved stone but some kind of metal panel. When she touched it, the panel lit up with symbols that shifted and changed. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing star charts and technical diagrams. "Can you read any of it?" Jake asked. Some. The mathematical symbols are universal and there are similarities to ancient Cathari script. This appears to be a record of their technology. As they studied the display, they heard a sound that made them both freeze. It was a deep rumbling like the planet's crust was shifting. Dust fell from the ceiling and small rocks scattered across the floor. Earthquake? Jake suggested. No, something else. The rumbling grew louder and now they could hear voices echoing through the tunnels. Not human or Cathari voices, but something mechanical, like machines trying to speak. We need to go, Zara said, grabbing Jake's arm. Now. They ran back the way they had come, but the passages were different now. Walls had shifted, blocking familiar routes and opening new ones. The ancient technology was still active, and their presence had triggered something. Behind them, the mechanical voices grew louder. Jake caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, things that looked like metal spiders the size of dogs. They moved with purpose, following the intruders through the maze. Jake and Zara found themselves in a chamber with 3 exits. They had to choose quickly. As the mechanical sounds were getting closer, Zara studied her scanner, trying to determine which passage would lead them back to their camp. That way, she said, pointing to the leftmost tunnel. It should take us back to the main cave system. They ran down the tunnel, but after a few hundred yards, it ended in a solid wall. They were trapped. Behind them, the mechanical creatures were closing in, their metal legs clicking against the stone floor. Master Jake, stay behind me, Zara said, drawing her energy weapon. No, Jake said firmly. We face this together. But if you are hurt, I will have failed in my duty. Your duty is to survive with me, not die for me. The first of the mechanical creatures appeared at the tunnel entrance. It was indeed spider-like, but made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed red and it made sounds like clicking and whirring. Jake had no weapon except a crowbar from his toolkit, but he stepped up beside Zara anyway. She looked at him with surprise, then nodded with what might have been respect. The creatures attacked all at once, scuttling along the walls and ceiling with impossible speed. Zara's energy weapon took down 2 of them, but there were at least 6 more. Jake swung his crowbar at one that leaped toward him, knocking it aside but not destroying it. One of the creatures managed to get past their defenses and went straight for Jake. Its metal claws reached for his throat. Without thinking, Zara threw herself between them, taking the creature's attack on her own body. The claws raked across her back, tearing through her uniform and drawing purple blood. Zara, no, Jake shouted. She spun around and blasted the creature point blank, destroying it completely. The other creatures suddenly stopped their attack and retreated, as if they had been called back by some signal. Jake helped Zara sit down against the wall. Her wounds were deep but not life-threatening. Why did you do that? He asked as he tried to bandage her injuries with cloth torn from his own shirt. It is my duty to protect you. Even if it gets you killed? Especially then. She winced as Jake tightened the bandage. A life given in service is not wasted. Jake stared at her, trying to understand this mindset that was so foreign to his own. On my world, we believe every life has value. We don't throw them away even for honor. And what do you believe in if not honor? Jake thought about it as he finished treating her wounds. Hope, I guess. The idea that tomorrow might be better than today, and that we should all try to make that happen. Zara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, that is not so different from what we believe. We serve honor so that future generations might live better lives. As they made their way back to their camp, taking a different route that avoided the ancient chambers, Jake found himself thinking about what Zara had said. Maybe their cultures were not as different as he had thought. Both valued sacrifice for the greater good. They just expressed it in different ways. But one thing was clear to Jake now. Zara's willingness to die for him was not just about some abstract code of honor. She genuinely cared about his welfare, just as he had cared about hers when he pulled her from the wreckage. The question was, how could he make her understand that he cared about her welfare too? A week had passed since their encounter with the mechanical guardians. Zara's wounds were healing well, thanks to a medical kit from her ship that Jake had managed to salvage. But the incident had changed something between them. Jake noticed that Zara watched him more carefully now, as if she was trying to understand something about him that she had missed before. They had returned to the ancient chambers, but this time they were more careful. The mechanical guardians seemed to activate only when someone tried to access the technology directly. By observing from a distance and using Zara's scanners, they had learned much about the vanished civilization. The beings who built this place had been called the architects. They had possessed technology that made both human and Ketheri science look primitive. Most importantly, they had built a powerful communication array deep within the planet's core. If Jake and Zara could reach it and figure out how to use it, they could send distress signals across the galaxy. The pathway to the core is heavily guarded, Zara said as she studied the holographic maps they had recorded. We would need to work together perfectly to reach it. Jake nodded. No more of this master and servant stuff then. This is going to require two equals working as a team. I cannot abandon my obligations. I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm asking you to expand them. Your duty is to serve honor, right? Well, what's more honorable than working together as partners? Zara considered this. Perhaps there is wisdom in what you say. Over the next few days, they planned their approach to the communication array. The route would take them through several chambers filled with active guardian systems. They would need to move fast, avoid triggering the defenses, and solve ancient puzzles that protected the core systems. As they prepared, Jake learned more about Zara as an individual rather than just a representative of her culture. She had grown up on a military base, the daughter of two career officers. From childhood, she had been trained to value duty above personal desires. She had never married, never had children, never owned a home. Her ship and her crew were her only family. Don't you ever want something just for yourself? Jake asked one evening as they sat by their heat generator. One is selfish, Zara replied. Duty is pure, but what about happiness? Don't you deserve to be happy? Zara looked at him strangely. Happiness comes from fulfilling one's purpose. I am happy when I serve honor. Jake shook his head. That sounds like something you were taught, not something you believe. Is there a difference? Yeah, there is. I was taught that humans should compete with each other, that only the strong survive. But I believe that we're stronger when we help each other. Sometimes what we're taught and what we know to be true are two different things. Zara was quiet for a long time after that. Jake wondered if he had offended her, but when she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful rather than angry. My mother once told me that the greatest honor was to think for oneself, while still respecting the wisdom of those who came before. I never understood what she meant until now. The next morning, they began their journey to the planet's core. The path led them deeper than they had ever gone before, through passages that grew steadily warmer as they approached the molten center. The ancient technology was more active here, with holographic displays and mechanical systems that had been running for thousands of years. The first chamber they entered was filled with floating platforms that moved in complex patterns. They had to jump from platform to platform, while avoiding energy beams that swept back and forth across the room. Jake slipped once and would have fallen into a pit of molten rock if Zara had not caught his hand and pulled him to safety. Thank you, he said as they caught their breath on the next platform. It is my duty. No, it's not. You saved me because you wanted to, not because you had to. Zara looked at him with those golden eyes, and for a moment, Jake saw something there that had nothing to do with duty or honor. The second chamber was a puzzle room filled with ancient symbols. They had to activate the symbols in the correct sequence to open the door to the core. It took them 3 hours of trial and error, but finally the massive door began to grind open. Beyond the door was the most amazing sight either of them had ever seen. The communication array was a crystal structure the size of a building, suspended in a cavern carved from living rock. Energy flowed through the crystal like liquid light, creating patterns of incredible beauty. But the chamber was not empty. A dozen mechanical guardians surrounded the crystal, larger and more dangerous than any they had encountered before. These were not spiders, but humanoid figures made of the same dark metal, with glowing red eyes and weapons built into their arms. This is going to be difficult, Zara said, checking her energy weapon. We can do it, Jake replied. Together, they entered the chamber moving as a team. Jake distracted the guardians while Zara used her superior technology to disable them one by one. When her weapon overheated, Jake covered her retreat while she recharged. When he was surrounded, she created a diversion that allowed him to escape. They worked together like they had been partners for years, each anticipating the other's moves, each willing to take risks to protect the other. It was not duty that drove them now, but something deeper and more personal. The last guardian was the largest, a figure nearly 10 feet tall with armor that seemed to absorb Zara's energy blasts. It focused its attention on Jake, perhaps sensing that he was the more vulnerable of the two. It raised a massive weapon that glowed with deadly energy. Without thinking, Zara threw herself between Jake and the Guardian. The energy blast caught her full in the chest, sending her flying across the chamber. She hit the wall hard and did not get up. "Zara!" Jake screamed. The Guardian turned its attention back to Jake, raising its weapon for a killing shot. But Jake was no longer the same man who had crashed on this planet 2 weeks ago. He had learned something from Zara about courage and sacrifice. He had also learned something about himself. Jake charged the Guardian with nothing but his crowbar and his determination. The mechanical being fired, but Jake was already moving, rolling aside and coming up swinging. His crowbar struck the Guardian's weapon, destroying it in a shower of sparks. The Guardian tried to grab Jake with its massive hands, but he was too quick. He climbed up its body like it was a ladder, using his knowledge of machinery to find its weak points. When he reached the Guardian's head, he jammed his crowbar into a gap in the armor and twisted. The Guardian shuddered and fell, its red eyes going dark. Jake ran to Zara's side. She was badly hurt, her breathing shallow and her golden eyes dim. Purple blood stained her uniform where the energy blast had hit her. "Why?" Jake asked, cradling her head in his lap. "Why did you do that?" "Because I chose to," Zara whispered. "Not because of duty, not because of debt, because I could not let you die." Jake felt tears running down his cheeks. "You crazy alien. We're supposed to be getting off this rock together." "The communication array," Zara said weakly. "You must activate it. Send the signal." Jake looked at the crystal structure, then back at Zara. "I don't know how. I will guide you, but hurry. My people will be looking for me. Yours will be looking for you. Together we can bring them here." Jake helped Zara sit up against the crystal base. She was fading fast, but she walked him through the process of activating the ancient technology. The crystal began to pulse with brighter light as systems that had slept for millennia came online. "There," Zara said as the first signals went out across space. "Now we wait." Jake held her close, feeling her heartbeat growing weaker. "Hang on, Zara, help is coming." "Jake," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I need you to know something. The debt is fulfilled. You showed me what it means to choose sacrifice, not just accept it. You are free of any obligation to me." "The hell I am," Jake said firmly. "We're partners now. That means we stick together no matter what." Zara smiled, and for the first time since he had known her, it was not the smile of a dutiful servant, but of a true friend. "Partners," she agreed. The crystal array pulsed brighter, sending their combined distress signal to both human and Cathari space. Somewhere out there, rescue ships were already turning toward this forgotten world. But as Jake held Zara in his arms, waiting for help to arrive, he realized that rescue was only the beginning. They had found something here on this hostile planet that neither of their peoples fully understood. They had found a way to bridge the gap between two very different cultures, not through conquest or conversion, but through mutual respect and genuine care. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Jake spent 2 days tending to Zara in the crystal chamber while they waited for rescue. Her condition was critical, but she was a fighter. The ancient technology around them seemed to respond to her presence, its soft humming growing stronger when she was awake and alert. On the second day, she was well enough to sit up on her own and examine the communication array more closely. "This technology is incredible," she said, running her scanner over the crystal formations. "It's not just sending signals. It's somehow amplifying them across dimensional barriers." "What does that mean?" Jake asked, though he was more interested in making sure she was drinking enough water than in ancient alien science. "Our signals are reaching farther than should be possible. Ships that are months away should be receiving them clearly." Zara looked at Jake with excitement in her golden eyes. "Help will come faster than we expected." She was right. On the third day, Jake's scanner picked up incoming ships. Not 1 or 2 vessels, but entire fleets. Human and Kethari ships were arriving at the planet at the same time, their crews drawn by the powerful distress signals. "This could be a problem," Zara said as she monitored the communications between the fleets. "My people and yours are not exactly allies." Jake listened to the radio chatter from both fleets. The Cathari commanders were demanding to know why human ships were in what they considered their territory. The human captains were asking the same question in reverse. Both sides were prepared for a fight. "We need to get up there," Jake said, "before somebody starts shooting." With Zara leaning on his shoulder for support, they made their way back through the cave system to the surface. The journey took hours, and by the time they emerged, the sky was filled with ships. Cathari vessels hung like silver daggers against the dark clouds. While human ships looked blocky and functional by comparison, Jake activated his emergency beacon, and within minutes a human shuttle was descending toward them. But at the same time, a Cathari transport was also approaching. Both ships landed simultaneously, their crews eyeing each other suspiciously. Captain Lisa Martinez was the first out of the human shuttle. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent years in deep space. "Jake Morrison?" she called out. "We got your distress signal. Are you injured?" "I'm fine, Captain," Jake replied. "But my companion needs medical attention." From the Cathari transport emerged a tall figure in elaborate armor. Commander Vex Kalam was even taller than Zara, with darker blue skin and silver markings that indicated high rank. His golden eyes fixed on Zara with a mixture of relief and concern. "Commander Veltar," he said in the musical Cathari language, "we feared you were lost." "I live thanks to this human," Zara replied in the same language, then switched to English for Jake's benefit. "Commander Kalam, I present Jake Morrison, the one to whom I owe my life." Commander Kalam studied Jake with interest. "You are the human who saved her?" "We saved each other," Jake said firmly. Captain Martinez stepped forward. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but we need to get moving. This system is unstable, and I've got orders to bring Morrison home immediately." "The Cathari female requires medical attention," Commander Kalam stated. "She will return with us." Jake looked between the two commanders, sensing the tension building. "Wait a minute. Nobody's going anywhere until we figure this out properly." "Mr. Morrison," Captain Martinez said, "you don't understand. There are political implications here. The Cathari Empire has been expanding into human territory. This incident could be seen as an act of aggression, and your presence here could be seen the same way." Commander Kalam replied coldly. "This world falls within the disputed zone." Jake felt Zara tense beside him. He realized that their rescue was about to turn into an interstellar incident. Two fleets faced each other in orbit above, and it would take only one misunderstanding to start a war. "Stop," Jake said loudly. "Both of you, just stop." The two commanders turned to look at him in surprise. Jake was just a cargo pilot, nobody important in the grand scheme of galactic politics, but he had something they did not have. He had lived through the last 2 weeks with a member of the other species. "You want to know what happened here?" Jake continued. "Fine, I'll tell you. My ship crashed on this hell world, and so did Commander Veltar's. We were both going to die alone, but instead we chose to live together." Jake helped Zara stand straighter, supporting her weight. "She saved my life more times than I can count. I saved hers when I could. We worked as partners, as equals, despite coming from completely different cultures. But the life debt," Commander Kalam began, "is fulfilled." Zara interrupted. "This human showed me that true honor comes not from blind obedience, but from choosing to do what is right." Jake looked up at the ships overhead. "You see enemies up there? We see proof that cooperation works better than conflict. Zara and I survived because we helped each other. Your people could do the same thing." Captain Martinez shook her head. "It's not that simple, Morrison. There are treaties, territories, centuries of mistrust." "Then maybe it's time for something new," Jake said. "Zara, tell them about the architects." Over the next hour, as medics from both ships tended to Zara's injuries, she and Jake told their story. They described the ancient civilization that had once thrived on this world, the technology that was still functioning, and the lessons they had learned about cooperation. "This planet could be studied jointly," Zara suggested. "Human and Cathari scientists working together to unlock its secrets." "Impossible," Commander Kalam said. "The Empire would never agree to such an arrangement." "They might," Zara said quietly, "if it were proposed by a commander who had proven that such cooperation was not only possible, but beneficial." Jake saw the implications immediately. "You're talking about changing how our peoples relate to each other. That's huge." "All great changes begin with small steps," Zara replied. "You taught me that individual choices matter." Captain Martinez looked skeptical. "Even if we wanted to try this, the bureaucrats back home would never approve it." "They would if they had proof it could work," Jake said. "What if Zara and I served as cultural liaisons? We could demonstrate that humans and Cathari can work together effectively. The idea was radical, almost unthinkable, but as they discussed it further, both commanders began to see the possibilities. The planet below was rich in resources and ancient technology. Neither side was strong enough to claim it alone, but together they could unlock its secrets. More importantly, Jake and Zara had proven that individuals from both species could not only cooperate, but form genuine bonds of friendship and trust. If they could do it, others could too. It took 3 days of negotiations between the fleets before an agreement was reached. The planet would be declared neutral territory, jointly administered by both species. Jake and Zara would serve as the first interspecies liaison team, reporting to both governments on the progress of cooperation. As Jake packed his few remaining belongings for the journey to the orbital station that would become their new headquarters, he reflected on how much had changed. 2 weeks ago, he had been a simple cargo pilot with no interest in galactic politics. Now he was about to become part of the most ambitious diplomatic experiment in known history. "Are you ready for this?" Zara asked, joining him at the shuttle boarding ramp. Her injuries were healing well, and she moved with most of her old grace. "Probably not," Jake admitted, "but that's never stopped me before." Zara smiled, that genuine expression he had learned to recognize. "I believe we will do well together. Partners?" Jake asked, extending his hand. "Partners," Zara agreed, clasping his hand in the human fashion she had learned. As their shuttle lifted off from the fiery world where they had nearly died, Jake looked down at the planet that had changed both their lives. It was still a harsh, dangerous place, but it was also the birthplace of something new. A friendship that had bridged 2 cultures and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a better future for both their peoples. The debt that had once bound them was gone, replaced by something far stronger. Trust, respect, and the shared belief that the universe was a better place when different people chose to work together instead of fighting apart. In the years that followed, historians would mark their rescue as the beginning of the Human-Cathari alliance. Trade routes would open between their territories. Scientific knowledge would be shared. Cultural exchange programs would flourish. But Jake and Zara knew the real truth. It had all started with 2 people choosing to help each other when they could have chosen to remain strangers. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the galaxy. Their work was just beginning, but they faced the future together as partners and friends in a universe that suddenly seemed full of possibilities.